Good evening and welcome to the Bloody Scotland Book Club for December. I'm Craig Robertson and I'm here to lead you through three fantastically and fittingly chilling books for this wintry month. They're suitably chilly, they're not suitably festive. They are books of bad will to all men and all women, and we're going to talk through them now in the company of three crime bloggers and reviewers who are at the top of their game. With me tonight are Alex Hawley from Hawley Reviews. Hi, Alex, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Really looking forward to tonight.
It should be fun. I'm sure it will be. We have Suze Clarke-Morris. Hi, Suze.
Hi. Hi.
And Suze Reviews at Suze Reviews, which is nice and easy for me to remember. And last but not least, I will turn off my mobile phone, which just pinged, so apologies for that. We have Gordon McGree from Grab This Book. A big special thank you to Gordon, because he's joined us at very short notice.
Very short notice
this morning. So big thanks to you, Gordon, for coming along.
Okay, let's see how we go.
Oh, we'll go fine.
We'll go fine. Yeah.
Tonight, as I say, we have three chilly books. We have, and we're going to start with a Stone Cold classic, which is the first in the Logan McRae series by Stuart MacBride. It's Cold Granite. And to get us into the swing of it, here is a reading from the man himself.
Hello. My name's Stuart MacBride, and I've been asked to read you the opening 2 minutes worth of my first ever published novel, Cold Granite. Now, 2 minutes on the ticker. Chapter 1. Dead things had always been special to him. Their delicate coldness, the feel of the skin, the ripe, sweet smell as they decayed, as they returned to God. The thing in his hands hadn't been dead for long. Just a few hours ago it was full of life. It was happy. It was dirty and flawed and filthy. But now it was pure. With gentle hands he placed it reverently on top of the pile with the others. Everything in here was alive once, was busy and noisy and dirty and flawed and filthy. But now they were with God. Now they were with peace. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, bathing in the smells, some fresh, some corpulent, all lovely. This was what it must smell like to be God, he thought, smiling down at his collection. This was what it must smell like to be in heaven, surrounded by the dead. A smile spread across his lips like fire in a burning building. He really should take his medication, but not now. Not yet. Not when there were so many dead things to enjoy. Chapter 2. It was pissing down outside, the rain battering against the blue plastic SOC tent's walls and roof, clattering in the confined space, fighting against the constant drone of the portable generators, making conversation impossible. Not that anyone was feeling particularly chatty at midnight on a Monday morning. Not with David Reed lying there, on the freezing ground. At one end of the lopsided tent, a 4-foot stretch of ditch was cordoned off with blue police tape. Dark, greasy water glinted in the spotlights. The rest of the tent was taken up by riverbank, the winter yellow grass beaten flat and muddy underfoot. It was crowded in here. There were 4 constables from Aberdeen's Identification Bureau, wearing white paper boiler suits. 2 covering everything with fingerprint powder and sticky tape, 1 taking photographs, and the 4th videoing the crime scene for posterity. Add to that 1 decidedly green-looking PC, the duty doctor, a detective sergeant who'd seen better days, and the guest of honour, little David Brooklyn Reed, 3 months short of his 4th birthday. They'd had to drag him out of the cold, water-filled ditch before death could be declared. Not that there was any doubt about it. The poor little sod had been dead for a long time. He was lying on his back on a square of blue plastic, exposed for all the world to see, an X-Men t-shirt pulled up around his shoulders. He wasn't wearing anything else. The camera flashed again, burning away all detail and colour, leaving an imprint on the retina that refused to go away. That's it.
Okay, just out of interest, was I the only one looking at Stuart's shelf under ours to see if my book was there? Probably. Alex, I know you've read this book more than once.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us what it's about and what you made of it?
Well, it's the first in the Logan McRae series, and the opening scene, talking about dead things, is where the character of Roadkill comes into it, and he's quite a very unique character. And Stuart likes to develop the books by looking at smells, sight, and everything around it. And his description is what first attracted me to it, as well as his comedy. And it's very relevant to Christmas because it's based partially around a panto at some point as well. And the panto gets Logan's bot into a bit of bother. So it's perfect for Christmas because the journalist doesn't like the way that Logan's been treated by his boss. So gives him a kicking because he's doing panto instead of doing his job. The book is very dark, and unfortunately, if you don't like reading about children, it might well put you off. It's not one for pulling its punches, but it's got 4 or 5 different plot lines, so it's got a lot to go, over 12 hours worth of reading. And it's definitely dark. And what makes me really laugh about it is the way that he talks about psychologists in the book, because that's relevant to his other series where he looks at it from the other side of the spectrum. And the way he takes the mickey out of things is why he's so funny. And not forgetting the Stobies too, when he's going to mention them, not in this book, but I'm sure they'll be mentioned in a later one.
You mentioned the children. I think that's a good point, because the victims here are very young children. How does everybody feel about how that went as part of the series? Suze, how did that strike you?
I always go into books that feature crimes against children with trepidation. I think, particularly as a parent, it just, it fills me with an extra layer of fear, I think. But I think, and then there's a lot of humour in the book, but somehow that all works. The children and the crimes are treated with the seriousness and the the gravitas that they deserve. But there is a lot of black humour running through, and somehow he balances that all off, and it works. And he cares about these kids, So I didn't find it as hard as I thought I might, but it won't be for every. There will be people that will find that quite tough, particularly when they're so young.
Yeah, as Alex says, it's not a book for anyone who's going to be easily offended or who doesn't like their share of gore. And
No.
I think it would be a risk, Gordon. And it's one that you need a lot of skill to pull off, and Stuart did that. It's to take such a sensitive subject and run with it.
I was thinking it was a very bold start to a series, and obviously he had, when the first book was done, he rolled it on and kept it going, but to come in straight away with a brand new character, brand new environment. I mean, Aberdeen's not particularly featured in many of the crime fiction that's been done up to now. So, he's given a whole new area, a whole new team, and he's taken possibly one of the most sensitive subjects to broach straight away. And, obviously it's a classic. He has nailed it. He's done it very well. The bleakness of the crimes, reflecting everything about the coldness of the granite, I know there was complaints at times from the Aberdeen Tourist Board that Stuart didn't exactly put the city in the best of lights, and it just felt cold. I mean, it's a perfect word for this show. I mean, it's the cold theme's going to run through it, but it did. And I mean, having lived in Aberdeen for a while, I know it's chilly. it's perhaps not the brightest of parts of the country, but I mean, it perfectly captured that feeling of being in the northeast. And just that greyness of it, the bleakness of it, and it all fed into the crimes that were being investigated, and also building up that city and that image of a city around you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Alex, did you feel that as well, that Aberdeen being used as in such a bleak way was a good backdrop for a story like this?
Well, it's more the characters that made it less bleak, because you got people like Steele and his other boss as well, that made it so that it wasn't as bleak as it could have been. Without the supporting characters, it would have been a bleaker book. But I didn't really feel bleak at all, because I just found myself laughing.
Okay. Well, this is an important thing, and Suze, I'll come to you on it, because it's one of Stuart's strengths. You know, his books are always full of humour, and again, it's a fine line to tread, because you can be accused of being too frivolous about it, particularly with a subject like this. But he uses it to offset the darkness. Did that work for you in this book?
Absolutely, because it's incredibly bleak. I mean, we're talking crimes against young children in the winter, in the cold. It's miserable, it's grey. It could have just been unremittingly bleak. And you need those lighter moments. You know, the boss with the endless supply of sweets in his pocket. And D.I. Inch, that is, and D.I. Steele with a bag out of her mouth the whole time. And then just there'll just be the odd sentence that Stuart puts in that will make you smile. Just after that bit that he read at the crime scene, when the pathologist comes in and there's a description of her physically, and in the middle of it, it says something along the lines of makes little mewing sounds when her thigh is nibbled.
Uh-huh.
And then and it's just things like that made me smile in the midst of that awfulness. And I don't think I could have read a book. If there hadn't been the humour in this, it would have been so bleak. I don't think I could have read it.
No, I think you're right. I think if it had just been relentlessly dark, with that kind of subject matter, it would have been a real struggle for all of us to get through it. But he's a man who knows what he's doing. He's a master storyteller, and he knows how to puncture those kind of moments. Gordon, Alex touched on this, but characters is something that Stuart does, and his main characters. I know you've read the other novels, McRae and Steele, but Steele is Logan McRae is in many ways the least colourful of the characters. It's the colour is round him. And was that a deliberate thing, do you think, on Stuart's part to create these wild characters at the side?
When you're throwing in, you're introducing McRae, and he's just back from being, quite savagely injured in the line of duty. He gains the nickname Lazarus because he did return to work. So from straight away, you're thinking, well, there's definitely something back there. And obviously referring to the nibbling of the thigh, we find out that the pathologist on scene is his ex. So straight away, you've got real issues with just the people he's seen day to day. And I think, well, that's, you're layering up the character without actually telling you much about the character. You've not heard much of him, you've not spent much time with him, but you know that he's been through the ringer. You know that he's been dumped by someone who's going to have to deal with day by day. And already I'm thinking, okay, I can get behind these people. And then when Steele gets up and running, and there's no one quite like Steele. And
no, she's my favourite, I must admit. She's just a fantastic character. And although while I say that the colourful characters are round about McRae, he's the deepest of the characters. He's not as obviously full of character as others, but it runs deeper, I think. Alex? It's
a series that's kind of meant a lot to me, because I was introduced to it while I was in hospital. So it kind of during what you consider to be a dark period, I suppose. So you need that comedy, don't you, to get you through sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely you do, and especially to get through something like this. As the series has gone on, how do we feel? This is obviously a really strong start for those who've read the other books, and I think all of you have read some of them. How does this stand up as a... Suze, this is your first, but
this is my first.
Case, will it be your last? There's my...
Oh gosh, no, I can't. I love this. I love this. I can't wait to read some more. I really can't. I mean, it was the nibbling of the thigh line that grabbed me, and also the prologue with Roadkill, what the character that becomes known as Roadkill. That prologue is just wow. And then just, 2-3 pages in, you've got this awful crime scene, you've got this X, you've got this whole thing already going on, and we're only 3 pages in or something. So yeah, absolutely, it won't be my last.
Don, what do you make of the series as a whole? Because it is undoubtedly one of the strongest Scottish crime series.
Oh, I mean, I'm a big fan. I think what part of the appeal is that you're never quite sure what you're going to get, which is fine, and that's the case across lots of books. But you always think Stuart will do anything to any character, and nobody's off limits. Sarah Hilary does that to very good effect as well in her books. You're reading and you're thinking anything could happen, and you feel that they don't have that protective ring around them that many other characters have. The invisibility shield, they might have a bad day, things might go wrong, but ultimately you're confident they're going to get up and walk away. You don't have that so much with this series, especially as when things go on, there's some really horrific things happen to big characters. And without spoiling too much for Suze and everybody else, there is definitely an emotional roller coasters to be had all the way down the line, particularly for Logan, who doesn't have the easiest of times, it has to be said, but it works so well.
Yeah, well, Stuart puts them through the ringer book after book, and you think, is there any more he can do to this poor guy? And he just keeps giving him more.
No, he just switches character and does it to another one, even worse.
Yeah, he's a bad man. He's a very, very bad man.
And I think that's what it is. It's part of, even if it's not directly happened to Logan, he's seeing it happen to people he cares about or he works alongside, and he isn't impacted by it as well. So it works so effectively. But again, the humor keeps it going and detracts slightly from the sheer horribleness of it. Horribleness is such a grown-up word.
Horribleness at us. There's no question about it. We have some comments, which reminds me to say to you, if you're watching live, please send us questions or comments, and we will read them out and we'll discuss them. We've got 3 to kick us off. Louise Colvin says that Stuart comes across as having a great sense of humour. That's not true. And this helps with such a serious subject. Gillian Duff agrees entirely that Stuart's humour and the humour in the book is the light in the dark, and one acts as a perfect foil for the other, and that's definitely true. Bridget Linton says this was her first of Stuart's books, but she had to go straight to the second. Clever, funny, thought-provoking, and great characters. Well, I think all 4 of us agree with that.
Definitely.
Yeah, so big thumbs up to Cold Granite, the first of our chilling books for this evening. We are now going to go on to Cold as Hell by Lilja Sigurdardottir, and Lilja is going to give us a reading from the book.
Hello, my name is Lilja Sigurdardottir, and this is my book, Cold as Hell. I'm gonna read you a very short chapter right from the beginning of the book. Down in the midst of the sharp-toothed lava, he regained his balance and reached for the hand that had slipped from the suitcase. It was cold as ice. He should have expected it, but the chill and the lifeless feel of the hand came as a shock. The tears forced their way from the corners of his eyes, and he whispered, "I love you," into the bright summer night, which seemed to have a tranquility all of its own for the few hours around midnight, as even the birds drew the line at staying awake all night long. His whispered, loving words were almost a sacrilege against the silence, so he didn't repeat them, even though he would have preferred to shout them out over the lava field, to fill his lungs and yell with all the power in his body and soul that he loved her. Instead, he crouched and laid his lips cautiously on the hand. He stayed that way for a while, and before he realized it, the warmth of his lips had passed into the back of the hand, so that the skin appeared to have come to life. His lips moved over as he kissed the cold hand again and again, kissing the knuckles, the wrist, the fleshy part of the palm that he had heard somewhere was called the point of remembrance, and the fingers, one at a time, until his lips touched something hard, the engagement ring. He pulled at it, but the finger seemed bloated, and the ring refused to move, half sunk in the swelling that had enveloped the hand. He licked the finger and spat onto the ring, working it back and forth until it finally came off. He dropped it into his pocket and quickly kissed the hand once more, fighting back the desire to unzip the case to see the face one last time. He wanted to know if it had swollen, if it had taken on the same blue tinge as the hand. But at the same time, he had no desire to see what death had done to her beautiful face. Everyone knows that flesh loses its color once the blood no longer flows, that a grey pallor takes over after a few hours. Death destroys everything. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the book.
There we go. First of all, huge thanks to Lilja for going that extra mile of artistic integrity and going out in the cold to read that for us. Suze, can you tell us a bit about the plot of Cold as Hell and what you thought of it?
Yes, I'm going to apologise in advance because I should probably murder the pronunciations. But although Lilja's books all do come with pronunciation guides, so I have referred to them. So we'll see. So yes, sisters. It's about two sisters, Aurora and Isefold, who are the children of an Icelandic father and a British mother. Aurora has always felt more English, and her sister has felt drawn to Iceland, and that's how they were. One was living in England, one was living in Iceland. There was some bad feeling there, they weren't speaking, and then Isefold goes missing, and their mother implores Aurora to go over to look for her. So, and that's where it all begins. Aurora is almost an outsider to Iceland because she's been away so long. She's been living in Britain, has a successful job, good money, and all of those things, has no desire to be back there. And yet she goes to appease her mother. And so she sees Iceland through new eyes. And so we see it that way as well. And for me, who's never been to Iceland, it's a fabulous way to find out more about it. It's not a fast-moving, action-packed book, but it doesn't make it that doesn't make it any less tense or atmospheric. And yeah, but Isefold has been there are lies to be uncovered, dodgy dealings, strange neighbours, people keeping themselves to themselves. So yeah, there's lots going on without doors being kicked in and guns being fired. It's a missing persons inquiry with some extra bits and pieces and some subplots and some fabulous characters, brilliant characters. But it's one thing I love about Lilja is she writes brilliant characters. And again, it's summer. This actually takes place in summer, but it's still cold in Iceland. But the lava field, you know, the location plays a huge part. Iceland itself, the lava. I'm obsessed with the lava fields. They just sound just incredible. So again, the environment plays a very big part in this.
It does, Gordon, and also not just Iceland, which is obviously as a character in itself in the book, that kind of goes without saying, but also the time of year and the constant sunshine plays quite a crucial role on the characters as well. What did you make of it?
I did enjoy this one. As I said, I've got down here as a slow burn, and it's definitely one that you get drawn into. And for me, I got drawn in and I stayed there because there was so many things that was like, how's that worked out? Why are they not doing what I think they should be doing? And it was a kind of there's a deception of a lot of the characters. You felt that although Aurora was, you know, trying to track down her sister, it didn't feel like anybody was trying to help her.
Yeah.
So there was a large element of, and again, this plays into the longer days of getting around and trying to get through and just trying to make some progress to uncover what had actually happened, because it felt like everything she attempted initially, she was getting rebuffed and wasn't having any success. And I was frustrated for her. I was like, because there's something more going on there, but you're like, why are you not helping? So there was definitely that fascination for me of trying, when's that breakthrough going to come? And it did come to a degree when she got hooked up with a family member who was in the police. I've got his name scribbled down here, but am I right? So
Daniel.
Daniel, thank you.
Yeah.
Can see the D and then it goes brrr. So Daniel then kind of starts to open a few more doors, and you then felt, okay, right, well, I know where we're coming from, I know what's happening, and you've got by this point the location, as Sue said, the location is stunning, and it does paint a real picture. So now you've got a bit of momentum happening, a bit of progress, and you, by this point I'm fully on board. So I'm going, where are we going with this? Right, we're here. But there's a subplot which, for me, as who works in financial services, is Lilja's books always have financial crime or financial manipulation, or there's always big money crimes going on in the background, or something along those. So for me, I'm looking for that. That's what I'm giving. Yes, because nobody's writing financial crime stories anymore. They're just not cool. Yeah. So when I get a chance to read a new book by Lilja, I love that about it, because it's something I can relate to, and it's something that feels so different. So I'm thinking, okay, she's still missing, but who's this guy? What's he getting up to here? So for me, that whole subplot was an equal draw, because I really enjoyed that part of it too.
Good. Alex, although as the other two say, there's a lot of stuff going on, but the longer it takes, there's a greater sense of dread, I think, for us as a reader, because we know that our sister is missing and it's taking longer to get there. How did you feel?
I thought, for me, of the three books, this was the weakest of the three, because it wasn't long enough for me.
Well, that's a good thing. It's not long enough.
But I like the background theme. I'm not sure whether the financial theme actually needed to be in the book, really, because having three distinct themes in a book can sometimes take it away. I think if it was, say, as long as Stuart's, it would have worked, but because it was so short, having three distinct themes in it made it harder to just wasn't for me as much as the other two.
Okay, well, that's it's certainly very different from the other two. For one thing, as Suze and Gordon said, it's at a slower pace. And I think for those who've read Lilja's other book, it is a slightly slower pace, but I think that's a sign of confidence of her as a writer, to be able to take this one a bit slower, and it's a bit more contemplative. It's taking more time to talk about Iceland and the differences between the peoples. And I think that's the strength, because it's, for me, there was always a sense of dread in the background of where things are going. Suze, how were you with the pace?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I really enjoyed this one. And sometimes it's nice to read a slow burn. We read a lot of the really violent stuff, and I know she wrote this because apparently there's not many murders in Iceland, but a lot of people go missing, and that's what prompted her to write this. So I absolutely had a sense of dread through the whole thing. But I particularly loved a lot. I loved the characters that she put in there, both central and kind of peripheral characters. I mean, I'm a big Daniel fan, so I hope he's coming back in the next book. Big Daniel fan. But I loved Olga and Omar, the neighbours, and their little story going on, and the relationship she built between those two. So yeah, there was a lot going on, but kind of gentler, at a gentler pace. So no, I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. And Gordon, I take it Alex's point, because it is a case that we all like different things and different ways and paces of doing it. How did you feel? Because it can't always be, a body every second chapter and a door kicked in.
That's what we like. We like it.
Oh, we do like that as well. Of course
we do. I know, but no, you can't have a corpse every 10 minutes, especially in a small place like Iceland, where it would start to get a bit suspicious. But I think, the pacing is important, and we touched on the scene setting as well very early on. And I think when you're building up that kind of visual representation of the place too, you can't just then drop a dead body in the middle of it. So there's some structuring going on, and it did take more time to build up. I think what we have to do is, because it's translated fiction, give a shout to Quentin Bates, who did, I think, a great job with the translation. And a lot of what I took from the book was the visualization of it, but also just the characters came through and they shone. And a lot of that's down to obviously what Quentin's done with the text. And you always have to keep in mind when you are reading translated stuff that there's two people behind the scenes making the words come at you, which, you know, I've read some other Quentin's other translated stuff, and I'm always very happy and enjoy the stuff he's done. But ultimately, it's Lilja's story, and she has given us this amazing landscape. And as they said, you know, because so many people go missing, because it can be so remote and so isolated, and just, you know, you can just vanish. So again, that emptiness and vastness and the bleakness that we're liking through the whole theme from all our books of what we've got. So even though it is a summer story, you don't have that it's blazing sunshine and it's the picnics in every corner. There is an emptiness going on there as well, which leads into the emptiness of the disappearing girl.
I do like the relationship between the two sisters, though. The flashbacks. And I like the relationship between the two sisters and the flashbacks. I think that's the good bit about the book for me, because you get to know the characters, and because the chapters are short, you feel that you want to wait and come back to that. I like the way that the dad describes the difference between the two sisters, and you get an image just from the way the words he chose, I think. Yeah.
No, I think that's right. I think that's a really good point. I think it's one of the strengths of it. It's one of the things I'm guessing, I haven't spoken to her about it, Lilja was trying to do, is to make the sisters, essentially one was Iceland and one was the UK, and trying to draw the differences between them. And I think more than in other books, she was trying to tell us about Iceland and tell us about the differences. And Suze, that worked for me. And I learned, I've been to Iceland a few times for Iceland Noir, but I learned many things I didn't know.
I've never been, and so for me it was absolutely fabulous. And the fact that we were seeing it, she was an outsider, having not been there for so long. Aurora was coming to Iceland as an outsider and seeing it anew, which was fabulous for me as a reader who's never been, to take in, you know, what the Icelandic men are, you know, her ideas she had of Icelandic men, and re-evaluating those, the scenery, the environment, the food, all of that. I love that. I love that. It was really interesting, and helped to draw me into the story.
I think what we have as well is we've got a dysfunctional family. So we've got the two sisters who don't particularly click, the mother who obviously favours one sister above the other, but not the one she can talk to. So you've got Aurora trying to elicit information from her mum to help her track down her sister, and her mum's not coming forward with anything good. You know, there was an incident I was flicking through to remind myself of the story before we came on, and it spoke about, there was a story about some drugs going missing, perhaps stealing from a family member and it was like, oh, you know, why didn't you tell me about this? You know, she makes stuff up, and do you not think this information is relevant? No. So you've got that frustrating mother figure as well.
I was very frustrated with the mother, I must admit. You want to give her a shake, like, just tell us it all now.
But I like that as well, because you've got, and you can almost picture the frustration coming from Aurora's head. Like, just, you know, help me a little bit here, you know, give me something to work with. So that for me worked too. It was, I mean, people love a dysfunctional family in any story. It gives an extra element of spice to things. But
yeah.
So
we all know one or are in one, and so we can all relate to that. We've got some comments. Louise Colvin, coming back a bit on Alex's point, I think she says that psychological suspense is just as good as action. What do you all think about that? Well, Alex, we'll go to you first. Can psychological suspense work just as well for you?
Well, it wasn't the psychological suspense thing that I do like psychological suspense just as much. I think it was mainly down to the length, and then other elements of the story which didn't work for me. I'm not going to go into those because I don't want to spoil it for people. Yeah,
spoiler-free zone, definitely. Sorry, on you go.
It just didn't work for me generally, but you know, it was still a good read, and it was still written well.
Good. Bridget Linton says she read this following Lilja's event at Bloody Scotland. She was not disappointed. She had me to the very end, looking forward to read more of Aurora's story, as I think a lot of pebbles have been dropped. Well, I think so. Are we going to see more? What at the end of the book? It does look like there's certainly scope.
I think there's more coming, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the plan.
I think there's something being seeded.
I think so. I'm guessing three of us are looking forward to the next one. Alex, maybe not so much.
Well, I had no idea that it was part of a series, so half the problems I had with it maybe resolved later on. So that could turn my mind.
I think she's kind of left strands still to be tied up, and on that front. Okay, well, that is Lilja's. Thank you to her again for doing reading for us. That brings us to our third book, which is Jo Nesbo's The Snowman. And before we discuss it, we have both a reading and a bit of chat from Jo Nesbo.
What do you mean? She said, inserting the key in the ignition and turning. The snowman? There was no response from the engine, and panic gripped her without warning. Quite what she was afraid of, she didn't know. She stared out of the windscreen and turned the key again. Had the battery died? And what did the snowman look like? She asked, pressing the accelerator to the floor and desperately turning the key so hard it felt as though she would break it. He answered, but his answer was drowned by the roar of the engine. Sarah put the car in gear and let go of the clutch as if in a sudden hurry to get away. The wheels spun in the soft, slushy snow. She accelerated harder, but the rear of the car slid sideways. By then the tires had spun their way down to the tarmac, and they lurched forward and skidded into the road. "Dad's waiting for us," she said. "We'll have to get a move on." She switched on the radio and turned up the volume to fill the cold interior with sounds other than her own voice. A newsreader said for the 100th time today that last night Ronald Reagan had beaten Jimmy Carter in the American election. The boy said something again, and she glanced in the mirror. "What did you say?" she said in a loud voice. He repeated it, but still she couldn't hear. She turned down the radio while heading towards the main road and the river, which ran through the countryside like two mournful black stripes, and gave a start when she realized he had leaned forward between the two front seats. His voice sounded like a dry whisper in her ear, as if it was important no one else heard them. "We're going to die."
The Snowman started with one single scene, a very filmic scene. I thought of this woman who comes home from work and she walks into the kitchen where her husband and her son is making dinner for her. Very, one big happy family, and she's saying that, "Oh, so nice, you're making dinner for me, and also what a nice snowman you built in the garden." And they freeze and they turn to her and they say, "What snowman?" And so she says, "There's this big snowman in the garden." And they walk into the living room and they look through the window at this huge snowman. And the father says that, okay, it's probably one of two of the boys from the neighbor who's been in our garden. And so the parents, they walk away, but the boy is still staring at the snowman because he realizes that the snowman is staring back at the house into their living room. And he gets a feeling that it's turned the wrong way, that the snowman should look, away from the house. But this snowman is standing a little bit too close to the house, staring into the living room, and that there's sort of an omen in that. And it is. The Snowman, I didn't plan as a horror story, and it's still a crime story, but it got more horror in it than any of my other books. It sort of followed from the theme of a snowman. It's a very traditional way of creating horror. Is to use something that is very close to you, that seems very cozy, like a doll or a toy. And when you put a snowman in a context that is a little bit different, it suddenly becomes very scary. And that's what happens with this snowman that shows up at various scenes of a murder. And also you can hear the voice of the killer, but you can't see his face, of course. And he's using a tool as a weapon, a tool that many people think they use in real life, and I don't know, maybe they do, but it's a sort of an instrument that you use for cutting up dead calves in the stomach of the mother cow, and he uses this for killing people, and all these elements together, they create this feeling of a horror story, and it's my most scary story, I think.
Well, there we go. I was going to tell you a bit about the book, but Jo has done most of that for me, and obviously much better than I could. It's Norway. It's the first snow of the winter, and it's the first snowman of the winter, but it's not a snowman that anyone wants to see. Young mother goes missing. The snowman, which nobody knows who built, has the mother's scarf tied around its neck, and it all goes horribly downhill from there. Harry Hola is Jo's iconic detective, is there to lead the investigation, which is seemingly a missing person, but he knows, his gut tells him it's more than that. He has a letter from an anonymous letter that he's sure is connected to the case. Then another mother goes missing. This time a decapitated head is found. There's a trail that goes back 30 years. And Norway's first serial killer is there to be caught. It's, as Jo Nesbo says, this is a lot of elements of horror in this book as much as crime. More akin to Cold Granite in terms of the level of gore and danger, and quite different from Lilja's. So let's go there. Gordon, let's not start with you, because you actually haven't read this book.
I haven't. No.
So that would be a good reason not to start with you.
I'll come back to my thoughts on what I've heard, but yeah,
right, okay,
maybe go somewhere else
we'll
first.
do that. Alex, let's go to you first. What did you make of The Snowman?
Well, it's not my first Harry Hole, because I read the first one, and I'm not sure where this comes in the series. Maybe you can tell me, Craig. I'm not sure what number it is.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Is that the second or the third?
No, it's number 7, I think.
It's number 7. So that's really close. If you add 2 and 3 together and then add 2 again, there we go.
Yeah,
pretty much right.
Well, it works really well as like a standalone one, because the Australian one that he mentions in the book is the one I read, which happens to be the first one, I think, if I remember right. And it just works because it's got 14 hours, and the way they it explains about the first serial killer. And for me, I don't know whether the audience is aware that the narrator who narrates it is also the narrator of the spy series Mcgill.
Oh, the Sly House
Lamb books.
Yeah. So he's got a really iconic narrator for the voice, and it just works for me.
I think it has to stand. I think anybody who's writing a series, it kind of has to stand as a standalone, and I think it does that. It can certainly be read on its own.
Yeah.
Suze, what did you make of this?
Yeah, well, it certainly stands as a standalone, because I've read 1 or 2 of the other ones, but not in any order. And this definitely stands as a standalone. It's a long one.
Yeah,
it's a long one, which I found. I did think it was a bit too long for me, actually. But I liked the concept. I liked the. I mean, there's again a sense of dread that runs through, big dread that runs through this. And I started to worry for any woman that had children in this book, because that's where it seemed to go.
Yeah.
And again, obviously, the weather is playing a key, the most key role here. And again, we get that scenery, we get that environment. we get the isolation, we get the woods, we get the snow. I loved all of that. It was just a tad too long for me, a little bit meandering towards the end. But I liked it, but kind of wanted to love it, I think. But yeah, I like the concept. I like the snowmen. It's a gory one, definitely. And
yes.
The weapon that Jo was referring to in his little bit there is something else, really.
Yeah, that's a nasty piece of machinery for sure. Alex, I'm interested coming to you on this, because as Sue says, this is quite a long book. It's incredibly detailed. It goes into a lot of detail. So it contrasts with what you were saying about Lilja's book, which you felt was too short. So how did you feel about the length in this one?
Because of the length, and because of the fact that he, at the end of the book, he tells you from the point of view of the serial killer, so you get to understand how it happened, and because of that, it made sense, I think. And although there was a few cliches in there, which happen in lots of crime, the cliches were explained away because of the length. If it was shorter, the cliches may have annoyed me a bit. It was fine because the length allowed the cliches to be explained away.
Yeah, no, I get that. There are things that definitely needed explaining, and I think he certainly did the time to that. What I was interested in the length of Lilja's chapters were maybe 2 or 3 pages to a chapter. These would maybe be 20 pages to a chapter.
At Lilja's book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a contrast. So I guess it's the author's choice, and it's the reader's choice to what you like. Gordon, I know you haven't read this specific one, but you have read other Harry Hole books.
I have, yeah.
What's your take on them?
This one sounds more interesting than the ones I've read, to be fair. I'm a big horror fan, so I do like my horror stories, and this one sounds like, having visited Norway, I wanted to love this series. I can see how the bleakness of a winter, in particularly in the, again, pulling into the whole theme of the books we've done tonight, the isolation and the bleakness of it would be good. The reading, and like I said, I didn't realize it was the same. I think it's Sean Barrett who does the books for Jackson Lamb as well. He's very enjoyable as an audiobook, so I would maybe give it a thought. But I read the earlier Harry Hole ones, and I think going back to the numbering of which book it was, I think they started with book 3 or 4, or maybe 4 or 5 in the UK, and then they released them in a strange order till they got caught up. So I think when you said it was book 3, you were probably spot on, actually, because if they started at 4, that would have been book 3. But I don't know, I lost the plot a wee bit with the character, and then lots of books seemed to be coming out, and I just never got caught back up again. And playing into what they've said as well about the length of it and maybe dropping off, I did find I struggled through both the ones I'd read previously.
Okay.
So
what about Harry Hole? Let's talk about him. Anybody? What do we think of him as a character? He's clearly become an iconic detective in a relatively short time. What do we think of him? Alex, what about you?
I thought the fact that he was trained by the FBI as a serial killer expert, and the way that his colleagues poo-pooed the idea, and then it was proven that it's not illogical, because I just thought that worked, because as we know, serial killers are rare, and I just think in a small country like it was based in, I think it needed explaining, because it goes against the grain, I think.
Although as they point out in the book, if I remember, they say, one character says, well, there's never been a serial killer in Norway, and another says, well, they've had them in Denmark and Sweden and in Germany and surrounding countries, so why wouldn't there be one there? Or maybe, of course, that there's one that hasn't been caught, which is the case in this book.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you make of Harry as a character?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I learned an awful lot about him. I mean, he's clearly quite complex and quite obsessive, certainly about his work. I was because I love a good character. I was very invested or interested in his personal relationship with Rakun and Oleg. I just, he's in love with somebody who loves him, but they're not together. And so I found that all, really quite interesting. And there's obviously some history. There's history in the previous books. I need to go back and find out a bit more about how they got to where they are. So I liked that side of him. You know, the personal stuff. But I agree with Alex, the fact that he's got that training from the FBI, which nobody else has, sets him aside. And there's clearly a respect there with his colleagues that was interesting to see.
He's a very dark character. Obviously, you know, he has these alcohol issues. He's incredibly obsessive. Is that part of what makes him stand out, Gordon? I mean, it's not like there's not a lot of hard-drinking detectives out there in fictional crime, at least.
It must be. And I think he's established. Most of this, you said this is book 7, he is established, so he's got issues. But I think that works in this, from what I'm hearing, it works quite well, because Suze is saying she'd like to see more. Yeah, I'd be surprised if there wasn't a detective that didn't have some issue or hang up or hook, and alcoholism, fair enough. That's in a Norse and Scandinavian country, the long dark winters and whatnot. I think that's quite a common issue. Although in Finland they apparently joke it off and just say it's part of the course. But yeah, it's not like it hasn't been done before, but he does it very well. Hall is a strong character, and you want to root for him. And I did find that even when I was reading the books, you know, I did get behind the character. I was enjoying his story. So, you know, if you've got a strong lead, that's half the battle, really. So
yeah, you absolutely have to. I mean, he could not carry this number of books without being a strong character and having a lot of people rooting for him. Suze, I'm going to try a contentious note with you specifically. All the victims in the book are women, and it's something that's talked about a lot over the last number of years. So I might have propensity to female victims. How did you feel about it in this book and/or in general?
It's not something that I don't have a strong. I mean, obviously, yeah, a lot of crime books, the victims are either exclusively women or predominantly women. I think that probably just reflects this where we are in the world and the society we live in. That the majority of victims of murder victims are women. I would think. It's not something that puts me off as a woman reading that. I don't feel like there's some agenda. I mean, there clearly is an agenda. The killer has an agenda, and it's very specific at women. But it's not. It wouldn't put me off. It doesn't put me off reading this book or any other books by Nesbo. I don't feel that there's some agenda going on there or anything. I think women. More women being killed in books is a reflection on the world, I'm afraid.
What about the other two, Alex? Gordon, what's your views on that? Alex first.
I think that the women as victims thing is a fallacy, because I think the problem is the fact that the victim is often seen as the foil for it, and you don't get to hear about the victim enough a lot in crime. The victim should be more of a focus. It's not just a women thing, it's victims in general, I think.
I think you're right. I think there's definitely an issue with that it's too easy to make the victim as fully formed a character as the others. Gordon, what about you? Where do you stand on it?
Obviously, I mean, I read a lot of fiction by male and female authors, so there's a good balance, and I don't find that male authors kill off the women and the female authors kill off the men. There's definitely a across the board randomness to it. I think what you're looking at is victims are vulnerable, and more often than not, a strong aggressor against a vulnerable female is an easier angle to take, shall we say. So it's more common if someone's on a killing spree that there'll be a vulnerable female, which is easier to subdue or overcome, and we're not even getting into sexual motives for either gender. So yeah, there probably is a higher percentage of female victims, but I'm not necessarily sure that's just because men kill off the women. I think there's quite a lot, often there's a reason or a story or as Alex said, you know, there's a cause behind what they're doing, and it's not necessarily just because there's a woman I'm going to kill her. So
yeah, I think Suze is right, and certainly in as much that it reflects what happens in society. And as writers, we do that. I think where it becomes a problem is if it's titillating, you know, when it's attractive women, they're getting bumped off and done in some particularly nasty way, then it doesn't sit quite as easily with me. We have some quotes, comments though, on the Snowman. I'm going to go a little bit one. Louise Cobbins says, read this quite a while ago, couldn't have got on with it, really struggled to connect with the story. However, Carolyn Warren says, read this one and absolutely loved it, but then I love horror as well as crime. She read it a few years ago. We also have Hugo Charles Hansen. Hi, Hugo, who's watching from Norway. He loves Nesbo's Harry Hola novels. Snowman 2, his favourite is The Leopard. He says the Snowman novel is 1 trillion, not a billion, but 1 trillion times better than the movie, which is made from it starring Michael Fassbender. I think a lot of people are in agreement with that about the movie. And Hugo says, P.S. he loves the Bloody Scotland Festival. Thank you very much. That's all good to hear. So slightly mixed on the Snowman, but generally we're up. Thumbs up for that. We are now going to have a surprise guest. Well, it's not that much of a surprise because we know he's coming on. We're going to welcome Avir Mukherjee to the room.
Oh, hello, sir. How
Hello,
are you?
good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, panel. How are you all?
Hi, Avir. Good, thanks.
Good. Well, congratulations on a fantastic episode. I've been sort of hooked listening to this. I was wondering what you'd all make of the Snowman, actually. But I agree, 1 trillion times better. No, it's an absolutely appropriate conclusion. Shall I tell you about next month's
yes, please.
panel? Well, for our viewers, you've got a wee bit more time than usual. We've got an extra week to read 3 fantastic novels. I'm joined next month by my guests Zoe Venditozzi, Lee Randall, and Jonathan Whitelaw, and we will be reviewing these 3 stellar novels. Exit by Belinda Bauer, the tale of Felix Pink, a pensioner who who assists people who are terminally ill, helps them to die, who then finds himself on the run following a tragic error. We've then got The Turnout by Megan Abbott, a sensual tale of envy and revenge and violence set in an elite ballet school, something for everyone there, and Edge of the Grave by Robbie Millen. This was our 2021 Bloody Scotland, Robbie Morrison, I do apologise, Robbie Morrison. This was our 2021 Bloody Scotland debut prize winner. Edge of the Grave is a tale of murder set in the dark and murky underworld of 1930s Glasgow. I do hope that you'll all read along and that you will join us for the first of 2022's book clubs, and that will be on the 26th of January.
They look fantastic. Also, 3 cracking covers as well. I really like someone's done a good job there. Like, before you go, I thought, I haven't warned anybody of this, but seeing that it's nearly Christmas and people are going to be buying lots of books, how about each of you recommend 1 or 2 books you've read recently this year that people should be out buying for their nearest and dearest? Seeing as you're the professional, Avir, you should have the least time to think about this.
Well, I'm going to recommend 2 books that have really stood out for me. Well, 3, but one of them we're reviewing next month. Exit by Belinda Bauer was my pick of the year. I loved a book called I Know What I Saw by Imran Mahmood. You may have seen his first book, You Don't Know Me, on the TV last couple of weeks. Well, the second one is even better. It's the tale of Xander Shute, who is a homeless man who thinks he's witnessed a murder, but the police are not convinced. That was one of my favourites, and I think we reviewed that earlier this year. And the other one,
I was there doing it.
And the other one I would recommend would obviously be Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby.
Very good choice. Who wants to go next? Who's got their books in mind? Gordon, go on.
I'll go next. I'll give you 2 as well. So my pick of the year has been Phosphate Rocks, which is by Fiona Erskine. It's a murder story, but not. There's a dead body being found in an old chemical plant in Leith. The former site foreman is sitting with the police, telling them what he knows about the plant and what happened on the plant. The dead body was found in a table in front of them. There was 10 objects, and there's a story behind each of the objects. And he will take you through the significance of each of these things and It's beautiful. It's anecdotal. Fiona actually worked in the plant that she's based it upon, so a lot of the stories are actually, we think, anecdotal, and it just rings true. It just feels like she's telling you about people's lives. It's a beautiful story. It's a crime story. There's some sciencey stuff in there that she makes actually really interesting, and it's like nothing I've read. It's really good. So Phosphate Rocks. And the second one, if you want a bit more of a police thriller to get into, is Dead Man's Grave by Neil Lancaster, which is the first in a series. I think it's due out in paperback in January, so nice thing to pick up in your book tokens. And it's just a cracking murder mystery. There's gangland involvement. There's an old family feud, and it's great fun. It's a real thrilling page turner, to use the cliche, but go for that one.
Alex, what are your recommendations?
I would go for A Wee Begin at the end. Chris's Theakston's winner was great, and yeah. And also Louise Beach's We Are Human. It's not, I suppose it's crime because it's got prostitutes in it, but it's a bit more of a story about growing up as a man. I think I'd say it's a bit more of a human story than a crime story, I suppose.
Good. Suze, what about you?
Well, I loved both of Alex's choices. We Begin at the End was my book of last year. So, and This Is How We Are Human is beautiful. My crime recommendation for this year is The Rabbit Factor by Antti Tuomanen. An actuary inherits a fun park from his late brother, along with some dodgy debts and dodgy dealings, and it's funny. It's human. It's a crime story, but there's a lot of humour running through it, and I just love that. I've also recently read The Quiet People by Paul Cleve, which is about a couple, crime writers, whose son goes missing, and they are in the spotlight because they have for years been at crime festivals talking about how they would be able to plan the perfect murder and get away with it.
Yeah, we've all been there.
That was a really
those are
interesting
some fantastic choices. I hope everybody take note of those. I would only recommend one. It's a book called The Undiscovered Deaths of Grace Mcgill. Unfortunately, it's not out till January, but look out for that. It's by C.S. Robertson. I can highly recommend it.
I haven't read it. I can highly recommend it too. It's a cracker.
I was going to say, Craig, I was a wee bit disappointed about the lack of mentions that you and I got in those roundups there.
I know, but that's why I felt I had, seeing as no one else pimped my book, I thought I had to do it myself. Well, I would recommend yours as well. Highly recommend all of yours. But get a new one first. Listen, thanks to everybody. Thank you to Alex, to Gordon, to Suze, to Avir. Thank you everybody for watching, whether you're live or online. Have a great holiday season, whatever kind of holidays you're having. Enjoy your reading, and we'll all see you with a beer in January.
Yeah, see you all next year, buddy. Bye.
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 Bye.